We have now been waiting a very long time for xDefiant with many playtests and betas over the past couple years. Shortly after the most recent playtest around a month ago, they announced an official release date for xDefiant being May 21st, which is tomorrow, and that really shocked everyone at the time. The reason it was shocking was because of the amount of issues that were going on during the previous beta and the most recent playtest of xDefiant. Me personally, along with many others, had hardly felt the difference between the beta and the playtest, which was really concerning considering the amount of time between the beta and playtest. The main issue with the beta could be boiled down to some serious netcode problems, constantly dying around corners, hit registration not working properly, bullets not doing damage on your enemies, and just all the stuff like that. Overall, it just added up to gunfights having a randomness to them, and that is possibly the worst issue you could have when it comes to a first-person shooter. If you know you're struggling with the game because of things out of your control, it makes you not even want to play the game anymore, because what would even be the point? And with those issues being made known to the developers very loudly by the community, they had announced that they would be completely reworking the netcode after the beta. So going into the most recent playtest around a month ago, we expected things to feel a lot smoother and that we wouldn't have as many connectivity issues since there were 9 months between the beta and our most recent playtest. But that was not the case. We went into the playtest and found out very quickly that the netcode issues were still very present. And that turned out to be very concerning once they announced a few days later after the playtest that the full release would be just a few weeks later. And now we are at the point where the game is coming out tomorrow. Now, them announcing the release date being just a few weeks after the playtest was very concerning because they had not fixed the netcode between the months of the beta and the playtest. So who is to say that it wouldn't be the same case between the playtest and launch, which is a lot of a smaller gap of time in between? Because if these netcode issues are not fixed at launch, the game is going to be dead immediately. Now, people are already skeptical of the success of xDefiant because of the constant delays we have had over the past few years. People are already saying the game has passed the windows of release where it could be successful, and if it launches in a similar state to the playtest a few weeks ago, that will certainly be the final nail in the coffin for xDefiant, and they would really have no point in developing it any further. But thankfully, Mark Rubin, the main voice behind xDefiant and a former COD developer, gave us some insight as to why the netcode felt extremely off and gave us some reassuring news about it. So he posted this on Twitter or X shortly after the playtest, and you can read it if you want, but I'm just going to quickly summarize it. First, he thanks everyone for participating in the playtest because it is of course how they get a majority of the data in order to make the game a better experience at launch. And then he goes on to say that they have identified some new issues and that they are going to be fixed. And then he goes straight into an analogy for the netcode. So he describes it like this. An analogy I've used when discussing our new netcode versus the old netcode is that previously we had an old kind of busted guitar, but it was reasonably tuned. Now we have a brand new guitar, but it needs tuning, and that's what this test helped us do. So based on that quote right there, they used to use an old netcode system, and then they transitioned into a new netcode system for the most recent playtest. So even though it was a brand new netcode system, it still wasn't fine-tuned the way they wanted it to be. So the old netcode system was kind of, you know, an older technology, kind of raggedy, but they had it tuned the way they want. But now they have the brand new netcode, and it wasn't tuned to their liking. So even though it was new technology, new netcode, it should be better. They need to tune it to their liking for the newest versions of xDefiant. And then he goes on to say he wants to share 3 more of the biggest things they learned during the test. Number 1 is the Delta 1 errors. This was one of the issues causing the extra latency, you know, getting shot around corners and stuff like that. So there is going to be a fix to improve the experience, but it hasn't been determined by how much it is going to change the experience. So we're just gonna have to see that at launch. That's something that worries me because it sounds like some of these connectivity issues do not have fixes set in stone yet. And then number 2, he says there were some issues with the health bars in the previous playtest, both over the players' heads and in the death cams. They were updating later than the actual damage, giving the impression that your bullets weren't doing any damage. So pretty much your bullets were doing damage, it's just the health bar was not updating in real time. It had a delay to it. So that's why sometimes when you look at the death cam and it looks like you did no damage to the enemy, that was was just the health bar having a delay. You did do damage to the enemy. And then number 3, they say they were not aggressive enough with their matchmaking when trying to find matches, so people had higher pings than they would have wanted. This is partially fixed during the test, so the last day of the test should have been better than the previous days, but it looks like they are going to continue to improve on this once launch happens tomorrow. Now that is the whole post he put on Twitter, but that is not the end of it. Today, the pre-season patch notes came out. They continue to address the issues he talked about after the previous playtest on Twitter. So in the pre-season patch notes, there is a section dedicated to netcode, and this says occasionally after you died, you could still run around the world for a few seconds. Now when you die, you stay fully dead. So I think what they mean by that is after you died, there would be a delay kind of with your character model, and it would still look like you're playing the game even though you were dead. And I believe this is the cause of why it looked like you were dying around corners a whole lot in xDefiant, because even though it looked like your character model went around the corner, you were already dead. It was just delayed. So now they say that that is fixed in the preseason patch notes. They also put in there that they reduced the range between the highest ping and the lowest ping in matchmaking. So now you are going to be grouped with players who have a more similar ping to your own. Now this is what made old school Call of Duty amazing, like we all know. Ping was king back in the old school Call of Duty days, and now they are saying that ping is king once again in xDefiant. We all know that there's no SBMM, but we still don't want to be matched with a ton of, varied ping players. We want to make sure everyone has a similar connection to our own, so it's a balanced experience, even though we're all at different skill levels. So now hopefully we can look forward to the release in less than 24 hours without having to worry about having these issues at launch. Because truthfully, xDefiant has a lot of potential, and I believe it is a game that players who enjoy arcade shooters need. They are taking a lot of the modern gaming trends that no one likes or enjoys, and they are throwing them out the window. It's free to play, fast paced, has unique characters with strategic abilities, has good maps, competitive game modes, no SBMM in normal playlists, praise God, custom loadouts, a ton of camo grinds, calling card grinds, challenges to complete, battle pass content to unlock, and they already have a roadmap for the year 1 content completed, and they have already started working on year 2 content. Almost everything about this game sounds awesome, and it has a great recipe for success, but all this great potential will go straight down the drain if the one issue we have been talking about in this video has not been fixed. It is just extremely important that netcode and connection does not hinder the player experience, because I, along with the majority of the community, will not play a game where the player does not feel in control of whether we win or lose gunfights or matches. One thing that keeps players on Call of Duty is how smooth it runs. Now obviously there are some outlying moments we have all had with bad connection in Call of Duty, but overall it is one of the smoothest gaming experiences in the market right now, in terms of both gameplay and connection. One thing to be said about xDefiant is that the movement is not as smooth as current Call of Duty. It does feel very old school, clunky, and floaty at times, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It is its own game on its own engine, so of course it is going to feel different than other first-person shooter games, but overall, once you get used to the movement after a few games, you can really get into it and have a good time. So that is all for this short video. Hope you are all looking forward to the launch of xDefiant tomorrow. I will be streaming and uploading xDefiant content on the regular because it sounds like it is going to have a lot to offer, and I love Call of Duty with all my heart, but it is going to be very refreshing to play something other than Call of Duty every once in a while. So please let me know in the comments if you guys are hyped for xDefiant. Please subscribe for Call of Duty, xDefiant, other FPS content. I hope you all have a blessed day, and I will catch you guys in the next one.